I hope maybe you've been watching this series of build videos, but I'm building my Fairdale Goodship, and the next thing I've got to do is install the brake calipers. So if you hang around, I'll install the brake calipers and probably move on to the derailleurs. Welcome back to my series of build videos for this Fairdale Goodship. To install the rear brake caliper, I'm going to put a little bit of Permatex blue thread locker on the threads for the mounting post. When you buy these calipers new from Shimano, they have some thread locker already on the threads. But since I pulled these off my old bike, the Van Dessel Motivus Maximus, all the thread locking compound has been removed. I wire brushed the threads and got them all clean. So I'm going to put some thread locker on there, install it on the frame, and then torque it to the right specs. So the thread locker I'm going to use is the Permatex, I think it's called the Gel Twist thread locker. And this stuff is kind of nice because unlike a liquid thread locker, it doesn't drip all over the place. So you just, it's like a chapstick. You just turn the base and you get a little bit of the compound, and it's kind of like a goop or a putty. And you can just put that on the threads and then you're good to go. The only thing I don't like about it is that once you twist it, it tends to continue to extrude the thread locker for a little bit. So you just have to kind of keep an eye on that. So I can show you this here. And I've got some thread locking compound on that post there. Now I can put this into the frame and put the little special nut on the back side and then torque it with a 5mm Allen wrench. Now I am going to use like a little wooden stir stick here. Sorry, I'm kind of off cam. I'm going to use the wooden stir stick to kind of distribute that thread locker onto the post, because if I don't, it's going to smear all over the boss on the frame and not really. It won't stay on the threads where I want it. So I don't know if the camera's staying focused on me or on this, but I'm just kind of redistributing that thread locker onto the post so it's not in a big glop. All right, that looks good to me. There we go. Ready for install. I've got the rear tire, or the rear wheel and rear tire mounted on the bike, and the reason for that is because when I put this in, I'm going to squeeze the caliper closed around the rim, and that'll center it up where it should be. And then to tighten this initially, I'm going to use this hex bit driver ratchet that I got from Craftsman. You can get this at Lowe's, or if you happen to have one from the days when Sears was still a thing. These are nice little ratchet. It drives a standard hex ratchet bit, and you can reverse it. It's got a little lever on the back, so you can use it to loosen. And what I like about this is that you can get into really small spaces on the bike. So I'm going to use this to do the initial tightening. I'm going to grab the caliper, I'm going to squeeze it closed, and that gets it lined up on the rim in the right place. And then with my little hex driver, I'll tighten this guy up. Alright, so now it's in place and it's not going to go anywhere. Now what I'm going to do is pull the rear wheel out of the bike, because the next step is to get in there with the torque wrench, and the torque wrench won't fit in this space with the tire in the way, so I'll just drop the tire and wheel out. And here's my torque wrench. I've got a 5mm hex key already on there, and it's set for 9 Nm. So the spec for the torque on these is 8 to 10, so this is set for 9. You may not be able to read that, but it's set for 9 Nm. All right, so now I just need to torque this guy in place. I'm going to brace it a little bit so it doesn't move, or if it does move, I can feel it. Yeah, that's not going anywhere. Now, to torque it, put a little counter torque on the head of the wrench, and then there we go. That's it. The wrench just clicked over at 9 Nm. So now that rear brake caliper is installed. And it should be centered up on the rim. So now to check if this is in the right place, I'm going to go ahead and put the wheel back in here, and hopefully this will still be centered up where I want it. Okay. Yep. When I close the caliper, it doesn't scoot the wheel to one side or the other. It's just nice and centered. Now the brake pads are not in the right place. I think there's a slight variation in the center line of the brake post location between my old frame and the new frame. So I can see that the brake pads they're sitting lower on the rim, and they're also when I look from the back, I can see that they're, I think, maybe canted upwards slightly. So the angle of the post and the location of the post is slightly different between my old frame and my new frame. So I'm going to have to move the pads a little bit on the caliper. For the front caliper, I'm going to do the same process. I've already put thread locker on the brake post, and I'm going to install this on the fork. But there's absolutely no room to get a wrench or a torque wrench in between the fork and the down tube, especially with the tire in place. So I've got the bike off the stand, and I'm going to do this just on the ground. It'll let me center up the brake and then get everything tightened up and torqued. First thing I'm going to do is put the brake caliper in place on the front fork here. Try not to make too much of a mess with my thread locking compound. There we go. And then thread the little special nut in the back side. I'm going to turn the wheel sideways so that I can actually get in here and hold the brake caliper in place on the wheel and start tightening this guy up here. Okay, that's starting to get tight. It's getting snug anyway. So I make sure that my calipers are nice and centered. So just squeeze that onto the tire firmly, and then from the back side get this snug. And then I'm going to come in with my torque wrench. Sorry, this is a really awkward camera angle, but now I'm going to come in with a torque wrench and finish tightening this guy up. Alright, there we go. It just clicked over at 9 Newton meters. Should be good. And yeah, when I close the brake caliper, it's not pushing the wheel one way or the other. The pads are actually pretty well centered up on the rim. This actually looks like it might be okay the way it is. Which kind of surprising, but nicely aligned, so I may not have to mess with the front brake too much at all. The rear derailleur installation is really straightforward. I'm just going to put a little bit of grease on the bolt, and then I'll tighten it in place, and it actually uses the same 9 Newton meter torque spec that the front and rear brakes do, so I don't even have to adjust the torque wrench before I put this on. I put a little bit of grease on the rear derailleur bolt, and now I'm just going to tighten it to the frame. There we go. My old front derailleur was direct mount, and I had a K-edge chain catcher on there. But the new bike does not have direct mount attachments, so I went ahead and bought a new clamp style front derailleur. So this is a 31.8 millimeter clamp-on type front derailleur, Ultegra 6800. So this is what I'm going to install on this bike. In the package for the front derailleur, there's the derailleur itself, which is a clamp-on type. You also get 2 shims to adapt it to a smaller seat post, and the fixing bolt. And then finally you also get the TL FD68 adjustment tool, which gives you the correct cable position and alignment when you're hooking up your cables. Alright, to install the front derailleur, I've basically put a little bit of thread locker on the threads for the fixing screw, and I'm going to wrap it around the seat post and put it in the right location. Now because the front derailleur doesn't have the cable attached, we have to adjust the derailleur cage using the low adjustment screw to line up the outer plate with the outside of the chainring. So I'll be doing that as well. You basically want about a 1 millimeter gap between the chainring teeth and the cage when the derailleur cage is in the right position. I'm just going to tentatively tighten this where it's at. And now that it's held in place with that screw, now I can go in and make an adjustment to the lower tension screw to move the cage outwards and check the alignment left to right. I have a standard Phillips screwdriver that I'm going to use to adjust the low adjustment screw and push the cage of the derailleur outwards slightly until it's in the right position, left to right. And I'm just kind of sighting down the top of the derailleur cage and along the chainring teeth. This is kind of an iterative process, just making little adjustments at a time. And I have about a 1 to 2 millimeter gap between the top of the teeth and the bottom of the cage. That looks about right. I'm going to go ahead and torque that to the recommended spec of 5 to 7 Newton meters. There we go. Now to check the alignment of the derailleur converter on the front derailleur, it's necessary to run a cable, and I don't want to do that yet, so I'm going to use a piece of string just as a stand-in for the cable to figure out where I need to set the converter on my front derailleur. Okay, so you can see that I have the outer cage of the derailleur lined up with the outside of the chainring, and then I have the TL-FD68 tool installed in the derailleur, and I'm holding my string, which comes from the bottom bracket cable guide area, comes up, hits that tool, and you can see that the string, let me get a shot from straight behind, you can see the string is just ever so slightly to the left of the center line on the tool, which means that I need the round bump on the converter to be set to the left. And right now I think it's set to the right, so I'm going to flip that around using a 2mm Allen key. And let it drop back in place. And again, I'll take another picture from behind here so that you can see what that looks like. So hopefully you can see that. Let me turn on the flash here. There we go. Now we can see. So you can see that the round end of that converter is now to the left, and that's where we want it, based on what we found out with the TL-FD68 tool. So that should do it for the front derailleur installation. We just have to put cables in. This new frame set did not come with a seatpost clamp, so I've got this really nice, super cool Thompson seatpost clamp here. Check out the packaging this came in, and that's pretty amazing. They've got a nice little manual here, talks about installation, and then here is the clamp itself. And one thing that's interesting about this is that if you're installing this on a conventional frame with an aluminum seat post, you install it with the screw at the back, with the slot in the seat post aligned with the slot in the clamp. But if you have a carbon seat post or a carbon frame, they say to install it with the slot forward, so that's how I'm going to be installing this on my bike. I didn't actually record the installation of the seat post clamp and the seat post to my bike, but it's pretty straightforward, and I already have a video on my channel that describes how I install a seat post, and I'll try to remember to put a link for that in the cards. Thank you for watching this third part of my Fairdale Goodship build. It was a little bit longer than the first couple parts, but I got a lot done, and I'm sure I have one more part and maybe 2 more parts coming to finish this bike up. And if you've been enjoying these, please click the like button and maybe subscribe to my channel or sign up for notifications so that when I post something new, you get notified to come check it out. Really appreciate you watching. And also, if you have comments like feedback or questions, please post them and I will answer as much as I can. That really makes it fun to do these videos. Thank you for watching, and I hope you catch me in the next one.